Previously on The Lowdown on the Plus Up. The Rocket Belt first appeared in early novels, comic strips, and movie serials as early as 1928. Nazis claimed to have made one in 1943, but being Nazis, they probably lied. Wendell Moore creates one for Bell Aircraft in 1957. Several people trained to fly the Rocket Belt and begin flying it commercially. Figuring that the pilots they've got are really too smart, they hired the kid who mows Wendell Moore's lawn, Bill Suitor. Rocket Belt guys fly over the 1964 World's Fair, Disneyland, in the James Bond movie Thunderball, which is really slow and boring, and a bunch of other places. A second Rocket Belt, the Tyler Rocket Belt, is built and flown by Suitor over the 1984 Olympics. Sometime oil man Larry Stanley tries to steal parts of the second Rocket Belt, but insurance salesman Brad Barker threatens him with a baseball bat and gets the stuff back. At some point, Pete meets Felix Silla, both cousin It in the Addams Family and Tweaky in Buck Rogers. Brad Barker decides that he knows how to build his own rocket belt, and even though he recently threatened to beat the guy up with a baseball bat, he asks Larry Stanley to help him. It's 1990, and the most prominent film about jetpacks is about to come out, The Rocketeer. And now, the thrilling conclusion. You think your Rocket Belt's funny, huh? Like a comedian. Like, you think it's kind of funny?
Well, you think it's funny? Like, how funny? Like, ha-ha, zoom funny.
Or even better yet, that with that Rocket Belt, you have enthusiasms. Enthusiasm.
Teamwork. Team.
Team.
By the way, that's De Palma.
Yeah.
Film nerd. Yep. Okay, so anyway, let's talk about The Rocketeer. The Rocketeer was created by a comic artist who is no longer with us. His name is Dave Stevens. Dave Lee Stevens.
Great artist.
Yeah, he was born in Linwood, California, and his parents moved to San Diego. He spent a lot of his time in the earliest San Diego Comic Con. But his earliest career was actually doing a lot of inking. He was a master inker. He did a lot of work on Russ Manning's Tarzan newspaper strip.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
In the 70s, he started doing stuff for the Star Wars newspaper strip. Yes. Yeah. There was a Star Wars newspaper strip.
I recall.
And it's as boring as you think it's going to be.
Not nearly as good as the Marvel comic with the giant green rabbit.
Oh, that is awesome stuff. Yeah. You know, like that's really cool.
Jackson.
Yeah, good old Jackson. But he also did a lot of fanzines, including inking stuff of Jack Kirby's work.
Yeah.
He also did a lot of Aurora feature for Japan's Sanrio Publishing.
Oh, interesting.
He also is kind of somewhat famous for all of us 70s and 80s kids for creating the plates for, what's it called? Monsters and Muscle Men or something like that. And it's a special kit. There was like this, there was a fashion toy made by Tomy.
Yeah.
Which you get these little plates. It was called fashion plates.
Yeah.
And you assemble the head and then the torso and the legs. You can make these different dresses.
Oh.
And you took a black Conte crayon. You would scrape it on, it's like a rubbing plate.
Yeah.
And then you take that rubbing and then you can color it in.
Yeah.
My daughter has one of these. It's a lot of fun.
Huh.
But I had one that was all monsters and spacemen and stuff like that, one of which had a rocket pack.
Nice.
A rocket belt character. But those were all drawn by Dave Stevens way back in the day.
Dave Stevens was in a long-term relationship, as I recall, with Scream Queen Brink Stevens.
Yes, he was.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Who I believe he used as a model when he was drawing The Rocketeer.
Absolutely. She's the physical model for Betty.
Yeah, even though the Betty Page.
Even though Betty Page, the pinup queen herself, was the inspiration for the character Betty. A lot of the physical, whenever she needed a pose, it was Brink.
Yeah.
But in '77, he was a storyboard artist for Hanna-Barbera.
Yeah. Including
Super Friends, the Godzilla Power Hour. And he worked with Doug Wildley, and for the rest of the '70s. He worked with William Stout and Richard Heskux in doing projects, a lot of storyboarding and production designs for Lucas.
Yeah. And
Spielberg doing Raiders of the Lost Ark storyboard work.
Oh, huh.
And concept design. And he also did a lot of designs for the Thriller video, Michael Jackson's Thriller, designing a lot of the zombies and stuff that would be sculpted by Rick Baker.
That's super interesting. As a weird aside, Kinnie Gibson flew the Tyler rocket belt for Michael Jackson's Bad tour.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah.
Well, there you go. See, there's connections everywhere in history.
Yeah.
The Rocketeer was first published in 1982, and it was just kind of a supplemental little 6 to 7 page thing.
Yeah.
But it was meant as a portmanteau of different independent artists' work. It's an anthology series, and it was published by Pacific Comics. And the comic was called Star Slayer.
Okay.
And it was just like a supplemental thing. Like the main, sometimes, especially in the independent circuit, life happens. Independent comic artists are not getting paid huge amounts of dollars to do an entire comic. So sometimes,
as a former comic book publisher, I can tell you this.
Yeah, you have to just kind of keep going.
Yeah.
And sometimes you need to have some filler.
Yeah.
And so it was originally meant as filler, but nobody remembers Star Slayer that much except all of us diehards. But everybody remembers the Rocketeer.
Yes.
And Star Slayer was great. It was. I remember it. Mike Grell did a great job with it. But eventually it became its own anthology, and Eclipse Comics finally took it over and published Rocketeer and Airboy. And it just took off because, again, independent publishing is weird, and you have to pay your bread and butter with supplementing your work.
Right.
They approached Disney and other movie studios with the idea of the Rocketeer as a film. Very early, actually. It was only like a couple of years. There was a guy named Steve Miner, and he purchased the film rights in 1983. So it was only around for a year. He said, "This is a great idea for a movie. Do it." So
interesting.
Within a year, it was already the film rights were already being shipped around.
Yeah,
but Miner just kept pushing it too far away from that original concept of this is supposed to be kind of like a movie serial. This is pulpy, and so finally. In 1985, Dave Stevens gave Danny Bilson and Paul DeMeo kind of a free option for the Rocketeer. He's just like, here, you take it and you make it work. Yeah. And they did. They were attached to it, and they really kind of gave that flavor of the old serials and the approach to it. Right. Over the course of the production, they got fired and rehired 3 times in the production of The Rocketeer because Disney, the studio, was like, oh, this isn't going to sell much. It's just like, oh. And they finally got turned down by 1986. They were like, we're done. Yeah. And I think part of that was the failure of Howard the Duck. Oh, interesting. Lucas's Howard the Duck that almost bankrupted him. So they basically felt that, okay, it's 87, 88. They said the Rocketeer's got some toy ability factor here. This will fit in with all of the craze currently of Masters of the Universe, G.I. Joe. We can make action figures off of this. Let's go for it. So Jeffrey Katzenberg, who at the time was the chairman, decided to let it go. And it became there was going to be a Touchstone picture. So there was going to be a lot more sex and violence involved because it would be acceptable with Touchstone. But Katzenberg said, if we're going to sell toys, it's got to be for kids. Yeah. So let's make it for Walt Disney Studios. After a long fight, after all of these rewrites and fighting over the tone of this film, they finally got it greenlit in 1990. Yeah. It's really interesting story. If you've never seen The Rocketeer, I really give it a try. Yeah, because
it's lovely.
It is a lovely film. Yeah. There's lots of little ties to history. There's a character in it played by Timothy Dalton called Neville Sinclair. Neville Sinclair is a big-time Hollywood actor based off of Errol Flynn. Yeah. Who is actually, in effect,
a Nazi sympathizer.
Yeah, but in this case, Neville Sinclair is an actual Nazi spy. Right. He's not just a sympathizer. Yeah. He's like, no, I am a true-blooded Nazi. Yeah. And he's trying to get his hands on the rocket pack. Yeah. Apparently, the rocket pack is invented by Hollywood producer and aeronautics aficionado Howard Hughes. So Howard Hughes is in this film as well.
Which is plausible,
It's
really.
Totally plausible, and it's a delightful little film. Yeah. It's directed by Joe Johnston, who started off as a special effects guy.
Yeah, I know that name for some reason.
Well, he did a lot of visual effects for a lot of films at Lucas, doing animation with Phil Tippett.
Okay, yeah.
And then eventually he had other ambitions, and he went on to direct Honey, I Shrunk the Kids.
Oh, yeah.
The Rocketeer. Yeah. Jumanji. Jurassic Park 3. The Wolfman. And finally, Captain America, the First Avenger.
Wow, that's a pretty solid career right there.
Yeah, I mean, And with a couple of exceptions, my favorites, of course, being The Rocketeer and Captain America: First Avenger. Yeah. He's not. And no offense, Joe, I'm actually paying you a compliment here. So if you ever listen to this episode, he won't. Yeah. But if he ever does, just understand that I really do enjoy your movies, but his movies are not necessarily movies that are going to bat it out of the park like, say, a Scorsese film or a Spielberg movie.
Sure.
But his films get the job done. Yeah. He's the workhorse who knows how to get it in on time, on budget, and boom, you're ready to go.
People will go crazy when I say this, but I'm going to say it anyway. Captain America: The First Avenger is actually my favorite of the Captain America movies. There's something beautiful and simplistic and nostalgic about it. I love it. And I like those other ones too. I do. Mm-hmm. But there's just something very heartfelt about that first one.
Yeah. And you can kind of see the Rocketeer leak through.
Yeah.
There's lots of elements to the Rocketeer that just totally leak through in Captain America, and you're like waiting for Cliff Secord to make this, little cameo somewhere in the background.
Yeah,
it's like you're owned by Disney. Just throw him in there put him in at the Stark, convention, and just have him off in the distance there trying to sell the pack.
Totally,
something. But I guess it's because it's not a Marvel property. But anyway, one of my other favorite little cameos that's made in the Rocketeer is the character of Lothar, who's the big lumbering, hulking figure that is the henchman of Neville Sinclair.
Yeah.
He is played by a guy named Tiny Ron Taylor. Well, Tiny Ron Taylor is a big fella, like yourself. Mm-hmm. He is about your height. He is 7 foot.
Wow.
So, I mean, Kelly is very tall, taller than I am, and I'm 6'5".
Yeah.
And Tiny Ron was in a lot of films. He was in a lot of big monster roles.
Yeah.
It's the same kind of thing as like Felix Silla. He's going to be in a lot of dwarf and midget roles and et cetera, little fairies and goblins and that kind of stuff. Mm-hmm. Where Ron is like, okay, we need a big alien in Star Trek 6.
Yeah.
He's the one who gets kicked in the knee.
Oh, yeah.
So that's Tiny Ron. He plays Lothar, and Lothar the makeup was done by Rick Baker, and Rick Baker made him up to look like an actual actor from the 40s.
Okay.
Who was named Rondo Hatton, a.k.a. the Creeper, who suffered from acromegaly.
Which is what?
It's a pituitary disorder in which your hands, your feet, and your face continue to grow.
Okay.
Tony Robbins, the public speaker, actually suffers from this as well. Huh. He has a lot of drug regimens and stuff in order to slow the progress of this.
Yeah.
Rondo had a very extreme case of this.
Oh, that's a shame.
But he decided to capitalize on this because he was very tall.
Yeah.
And he was very strong. Mm-hmm. So they decided, well, we don't need movie monsters. We don't need to hire Jack Pierce to make Frankenstein. We got a real guy who's really ugly.
Yeah.
So we'll just call him the Creeper. So he's in 2 films where he is the main villain, and he's this big ugly dude, the brute man, and enter the Creeper or meet the Creeper, and it's like it's just Rondo.
Yeah.
But so Rick Baker made him up to look like Rondo.
Yeah.
Because Dave Stevens actually based the character of Lothar on Rondo Hatton. And he's basically, just like how he's drawing Betty Page in all of his comic panels, he's drawing Rondo Hatton in this role.
Huh.
So it's delightful. And I remember going to WonderCon and meeting Tiny Ron, who was there promoting the Rocketeer.
Yeah.
And I asked him, how's the weather up there? Tee-hee-hee.
Oh, dear.
He picked me up by my shoulders. Mm. He just grabbed my arms and lifted me up, and he goes, I don't know, you tell me. And I realized how strong this guy really was.
Yeah, and maybe you shouldn't mess with him.
Yeah, there are scenes in which he's lifting up Cliff Secord. He's like, where is the rocket? And he's like slamming Cliff's head into the ceiling.
Yeah.
He's really lifting him up.
Yeah.
He's not a lift. He's really yanking him up and down.
Yeah.
And if you're watching The Rocketeer, he makes a little cameo out of makeup. Mm-hmm. There's a sequence, it's the first time that Cliff is really flying the rocket pack. He's just saved his buddy, Malcolm, from, I'm a big fan of this film. I love The Rocketeer. So he's saving Malcolm from an incident at an airfield, and all of a sudden the rocket pack goes haywire. Mm-hmm. And he's flying desperately, trying to get away from the bad guys, and Peavy's chasing him in a truck, and Cliff flies through this cornfield, and you see these 2 farmers watching all these sheaves of corn flipping up at a rapid pace, and one goes, big gopher. And there's this really tall guy standing next to that farmer. That's Tiny Ron without the makeup on.
Huh, okay.
So he makes a quick little cameo as, without sans makeup.
That's great.
And the Rocketeer has some Bay Area ties because obviously a lot of the effects were done in Industrial Light and Magic.
Yeah.
Steve Gawley, who was an effects supervisor for Back to the Future. He was a model maker on a lot of Star Wars movies. I got to work with him on that exact same NASA exhibit.
Oh, nice.
He helped build space shuttle models and that kind of stuff. Most of the people who built the models were all old school guys that built models. Don Bees, Grant Imahara, a bunch of people actually, Nelson Hall, they all built all these models for this NASA exhibit. And I was brought in kind of at the last minute. And a little bit as an afterthought. Yeah. But I became a part of this team, and it was really cool hearing all these Hollywood stories during lunch breaks.
Yeah.
And one of my favorite, and Steve is very, very reclusive. He's very shy kind of guy. But I think that was kind of like the sales point that I know who he was.
Yeah, yeah.
But he taught me how to do weathering on this giant model of a space shuttle. It was full size, so we're putting blast shields, how to make sewage come out of the ports and stuff to make it look realistic.
Yeah.
I learned how to paint poop from an ILM guy. But one of my favorite stories is the fact that there's a sequence at the end in which the Rocketeer and, in this case, Jenny, because they didn't want to have to deal with Betty Page's estate, or the fact that it's a Disney movie and you're using a 50s pinup model as the main character.
A 50s fetish pinup novel.
Yeah, so Jenny, played by the lovely Jennifer Connelly, and Cliff are running away from Lothar on the top of this failing and burning Zeppelin over Hollywood.
Yeah.
And it's exploding compartment by compartment. It's like time is. It's a total cliffhanger.
Yeah.
Each compartment is exploding in sequence. They filmed that out on an airstrip so that way they could, not be anywhere near us because those explosions were huge.
Right, right.
And they were real. This is not a green screen situation. Once they reach certain marks that are painted on the top of the Zeppelin, there's an explosive guy who's really blowing stuff up.
Yeah.
Now, there are some green screen shots, but there are some shots where they're really running away from these exploding envelopes.
Yeah.
But then there are scenes in which the model of the Zeppelin has to look like it's on fire, and you can see these explosions going one at a time.
Yeah.
There's a great movie called The Producers in which the main character is, well, we have to understand whether this is the quick fuse or the slow fuse.
Yes.
The problem is they put the quick fuse into the first model of the Zeppelin.
Oops.
And they exploded it on Mare Island. Not too far away from where Kelly and I are sitting while we are recording this, actually.
We can pretty much walk there.
We can walk to Mare Island and walk to the very spot where they blew this thing up. And they exploded it in the middle of the night, and all the envelopes went off at once.
Oh, dear.
It was like the Death Star exploding. Just whammo!
Yeah.
And everything was gone. It was like they spent all this time making this perfect Zeppelin model, like meticulously gluing it together, putting it together. They learned very quickly, all of their planning paid off of like cataloging how they built it as they went.
Yeah, because they had to rebuild it.
They had to rebuild it within a couple of weeks as opposed to a couple of months, and they did it. So that model that you see in the film is the second model that they did kind of haphazardly. Yeah. But they got the shot. It was crazy. And I went over to Steve Gawley's house for a barbecue at one point, and he showed me the puppet that they used for the flying sequences when Cliff is flying around and he salutes Air Force One. Yeah. He's flying up there. Some of those distant shots, it's not actually Billy Campbell on wires. He's actually flying around. It's actually a puppet, good old rod puppet style.
Oh, that's cool.
And so he had it. He had that. So I'm holding the Rocketeer. This is really cool.
Well, you got to hold puppet Bill Campbell.
Yeah. And the Rocketeer was, I saw that movie, I swear to God, I must have seen that a dozen times in the theater. Yeah. Ticket after ticket. I was so enchanted by the James Horner score. Yeah. I love the effects. I love the flavor of it. I think it captured the pulp serialized adventure flavor better than The Shadow or The Phantom, which were movies that came out not too long and after those films. Yeah. It had that same kind of jazz that Raiders of the Lost Ark had, only with less of the edge. Right. And it was just darn right fun. Yeah. The sad thing is, I was kind of alone.
Not a lot of people saw it.
Seemingly alone. Yeah. In the grand scheme of things, because not a lot of people saw it. Yeah. And there were plans for Disneyland at this time, while they were releasing this film, to do a whole new expansion of Tomorrowland to make it Discovery Bay.
Yes.
with Tony Baxter making his proposal for Discovery Bay, and they're kind of chiseling away at it. Well, maybe we could do this.
Yeah.
Maybe we could do this with Discovery Bay and leave the rest of this out. Maybe we could chisel this part in.
Yeah.
And then the Rocketeer came out, and it's like, well, now that's gone.
Yeah.
So you couldn't even get Rocketeer merchandise. They did have some meager merchandise sales. They had a couple of T-shirts.
Right.
I think I bought everything, which was like a dozen items of Rocketeer merchandise, like the read-along record book. They didn't have an action figure, folks. Yeah. They made a bendy. They made a Gumby-style bendy of the Rocketeer, because this came out not long after Dick Tracy. So you had Dick Tracy and the Rocketeer coming out.
Isn't this interesting how often this happens with Tomorrowland, that there's some property that they're like, here we go, here's the hook. Yep. That we can redo Tomorrowland with. The Rocketeer was obviously one. The movie Tomorrowland was obviously one. It seems pretty clear to me that the Fantastic Four is about to be one. Mm-hmm. And just over and over, and, knock on wood, this is not the case with the Fantastic Four, but over and over, the movie doesn't pull it off.
Which is weird, because there was a making of behind the scenes, like sneak preview of the Rocketeer that was done on the Disney Channel. Yeah. You could find it on YouTube, and I watched it, and they make reference to the Rocket Man of Disneyland multiple times, showing the guy, rocket packs really do exist. Yeah. And they show the footage of here at Disneyland. We have this. And you got Bill Campbell going, that's pretty great. Yeah. Sorry, Bill. But, it didn't work out well. And the only thing for the longest time in Disneyland of the Rocketeer was a popcorn machine.
Okay.
In Tomorrowland. Yeah. One of the popcorn carts in Tomorrowland. Mm-hmm. In Disneyland, a lot of the popcorn parts have these little attachments to this little barrel it's a decorative barrel of somebody turning a popcorn barrel around. Right. In New Orleans Square, it's one of the grim grinning ghosts. Sure. In Bear Country, it's Big Albert. Yeah. And then in Tomorrowland, it's the Rocketeer. Yeah. Pumping away and that was it. Yeah. And much to my chagrin, because and when they had the rocket rods, there was talk like, it's going to look like the Rocketeer.
Which would be cool.
It would have been if it wasn't the world's largest planter.
Yes.
So the Rocketeer, there has been talk for years about doing a sequel. Right. They did do a cartoon series of the Rocketeer. It was
for like a year, and it actually did pretty well. Weirdly,
I was not a fan of it, but it just didn't sing to me. Yeah, and it's not that it was bad. I just didn't care for it. That's just me.
I haven't seen it. I find it really strange that they made an animated version of a movie that was a bomb 25 years before. That seems odd, but they've done weirder things. So I have
a feeling it was greenlit the same time that Tron Legacy was greenlit. Probably.
I think there were a lot of people who sort of saw that sweet, sweet Tron money and went, "Hey, maybe we could do something with this.
Maybe we should do Condor Man." He's got a rocket pack.
The apple dumpling coaster.
I'm in. Yeah, the apple. I mean, that's the thing. They should do the flying saucer bumper cars in Frontierland as the apple dumpling gang.
Yes,
bumper barrels.
And they could change the Primeval World diorama from the train to the baby Story of the Lost Legend diorama.
See, we're in. We're in. And now we know what to do with the People Mover, because you enter into the black hole.
And basically, I just want a Patrick McGowan audio animatronic somewhere. That's all I want, really.
Now, wait. Patrick McGowan from Baby, or Patrick McGowan from That Darn Cat, or whatever that was?
The Three Lives of Thomasina.
Yeah, Thomasina. That's right.
No, Patrick McGowan from Dr. Sin, alias the Scarecrow.
Oh, now you're talking. Yeah. Now you are talking.
That's the overlay I'm looking for in the Haunted Mansion.
Scarecrow. I'm sorry. So the Rocketeer, a lot of people actually do credit the Rocketeer for getting the comic movie industry a little bit of a boost in saying you don't need to go with the big titles like Batman or Superman, because Batman was already a big film. The Burton Batman films had come and gone. Yeah. But the Rocketeer, a lot of people actually do credit it saying it told people that comic book movies could still be fun and entertaining. Mm-hmm. And there's a number of factors that why it didn't work. Yeah. But I still think it does age well, actually. And I think you really, if you have not seen The Rocketeer, dear listeners, please go and watch it, because it is so worth an afternoon of popcorn and soda.
Yeah.
It really is. It's fun.
Yeah.
It is just darn right fun.
It totally is. It's light. It's a great popcorn movie.
Yeah.
You can watch it with your kids. You'll be fine.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's totally kid friendly.
Yeah.
It's totally. It's almost completely kid friendly. I mean, there's some cleavage jokes.
Yeah.
But that's about it.
Yeah. And, we had those when we were kids, and look how we turned out.
I don't know if that's a good sales point, but that's okay. But what's interesting is that having seen The Rocketeer over and over and over again, when Kelly first started proposing this particular episode and started telling me the story of the rocket belt, my eyeballs and my jaw hit the floor. My eyeballs started bugging out of my skull because I went, wait a second, life imitates art in some very strange ways.
Oh, yeah. So let's pick this story back up in right around 1992 is I think we're at.
That's when The Rocketeer came out. Yep.
And I'll go back over the characters because they're all about to come into play again.
As we last saw our heroes.
Yeah. So we have Kinnie Gibson, who's the stunt man, who's basically the sole owner of the Tyler rocket belt at this point. He's going around flying it all over the place. He was friends with Barker and Larry Stanley. He's had a falling out with Stanley. So has Barker. He's about to have a falling out with Barker. And we have Barker himself, who's an insurance salesman from Illinois. He gets the idea to build his own rocket belt, in spite of threatening Larry Stanley with a baseball bat and beating up one of his oil ranch hands. He convinces Larry Stanley to go in on it with him. And we're about to meet a younger kid. Well, he's I say young. He's like nearing 30 at this point when he becomes involved with these guys. He's from Michigan. His name's Joe Wright.
Okay.
Everyone loves this kid.
Because he's the right stuff.
Yeah. But he moves.
Marvel and Wilbur would be so proud.
He moves out to Houston, which is where he meets the two of them, Stanley and Barker. He opens up a little car audio shop, takes off. He's doing really well. He kind of becomes friends with Barker and Stanley. At one point, Barker invites Joe Wright to go with him to visit Kinnie Gibson, where they're doing a rocket belt show. And Gibson gets a little perturbed because what he notices is that Barker and Wright seem to be taking lots and lots of close-up pictures of the rocket belt. He gets really mad. They end up sending Joe Wright home. Barker kind of stays on for a little while, and then Barker and Gibson have a falling out. Anyway, so at this point, Gibson's not talking to it. He doesn't want to have anything to do with any of these guys.
Right.
Barker is friends with Joe Wright. Larry Stanley's friends with Joe Wright. Barker and Stanley form a small corporation called ARC, the American Rocket Belt Company. They issue 1,000 shares of stock and give it to themselves.
It's publicly traded, but the stocks aren't in public, so who cares? Yeah.
They talk Joe Wright into letting them have some space, like an office and some workspace in his car audio shop in Houston. And they start working on the Rocket Belt 2000.
Oh, no. This just sounds like bad news.
This is bad news.
The Friends of the Magic Gathering is coming to the Disneyland Resort this May 3rd and 4th, 2025. Spend the weekend with some of your favorite podcasters, along with other listeners, as we enjoy the Disneyland Resort. As a special treat this year, we're having a special Saturday night dining event featuring TV dinners inside Howard Johnson's spectacular tribute to Disneyland's former Monsanto Plastics House of the Future, the House of the Retro Future Suite. After dinner, Peter Overstreet and Kelly McCubbin from the Lowdown on the Plus Up podcast will be recording a special episode of their show live from inside the House of the Retro Future Suite. That's May 3rd and 4th, 2025 at the Disneyland Resort. Visit friendsofthemagic.com for more information.
And so they start working on it, and they build it. They actually pull it together. They get some help from a few other people. They talk to some aeronautics specialists. They bring in a bunch of different people. But eventually they get something that pretty much works. It's beautiful. It is supposedly like bright red and shiny silver. Wow. It looks futuristic. And they're like, okay, you know, we need to do some tests with this thing. The RB2000. We need to do some tests. And when you need to test a rocket belt, who do you call? Bill Suitor.
Bill Suitor. Once more.
So they call Suitor. They get him to come out to Houston. And, you know, they do it with a picture. They show him how gorgeous this thing is. And Pete's looking at pictures of it right now.
Yeah.
And it's beautiful.
It is. It's actually really cool. It's almost like something out of the Micronauts.
Yeah. And
so cool.
Suitor just can't help it. He's like, I have to go and see. So he gets out there and they tell him, they're like, hey, we want to name it. Will you name it for us? And Suitor looks at it for a minute and says, Pretty Bird. So he names the RB2000 Pretty Bird. Now, for some of you, this may sound a little bit familiar. There is a film based on the story from this point called Pretty Bird.
Okay.
With Paul Giamatti. It's a little tough to find, but it's out there. And it's roughly based on this same book that we were talking about earlier. Suitor starts testing the thing. Turns out it works pretty well. It's one of their things was they were trying to put more fuel in so it could fly longer. But of course, with more fuel comes more weight.
Yep.
So it doesn't do that much more.
Right.
And
22 seconds.
Yeah, kind of. And at this point, you know, later when asked about it, Suitor's like, all the hype spread by Barker was just that, hype. Barker was a showman, not a scientist. Had we fooled around with the rocket belt, it may well have had a runtime of 28 seconds. But what have you really gained? You've just spent a small fortune reinventing the wheel. You still have a machine that's useless for anything other than shows. So, and then they asked him, why'd you call it Pretty Bird then? He said, if nothing else, it was very pretty.
Wow.
After he does some initial tests, he proves that it works. He goes home, and here's the quote from Barker that I love. He said, Suitor flew home, we finished the belt, and from then on, there was murder, kidnapping, and all kinds of stuff. This is where it gets crazy.
Oh my God. What?
Barker and Stanley start arguing about who's going to fly the rocket belt. They each want to. Stanley's kind of a heavier guy, but he's been trying to lose weight so he can fly the rocket belt. The argument ends with Barker pressing a 9mm semi-automatic pistol to Stanley's head.
What?
They finally calm down. He doesn't shoot Stanley. They break it up. Later, Barker comes back and apologizes. A few days later, they have another argument that ends up with a fight that ends up with Barker with his finger getting broken. A few days later...
Did he tell him to go get his shine box or something like that? I mean, what is... Good Lord.
A few days later, they have another argument, and Barker attacks Larry Stanley with a hammer.
Oh,
right. They
Rip
both
Torn style.
Yeah, they're in the office. They're in the office of Joe Wright's.
Norman Mailer calls him up on, man, I hear you. I'm so sorry. I hear you.
They're in the office at the car audio place.
Yeah.
They've smashed out the door. Stanley's. All right, brace yourself, everyone. Stanley has had part of his finger severed off by the hammer attack. He goes, he has stitches in his skull. He has to have part of his finger sewed back on. Like he's just covered in blood.
What?
So at this point,
I mean, I shouldn't be laughing at this sheer amount of mayhem, but this is insane.
So at this point, Barker and Stanley are pretty much done.
Yeah, he went back, he apologized. They were back in partnership, They opened a flower shop together. It was great.
But they each own half of the rocket belt, and they're both really, really obsessed with the rocket belt. So they kind of break up for a little bit, and Barker and Joe Wright, the younger guy who owns the car audio shop, they hire a lawyer and quickly set up another company. They build a company called Duratron.
Oh, jeez.
And then Duratron quickly purchases all of the American Rocket Belt Company's assets, including the rocket belt. Now, Stanley knows nothing about this, but some other company's just been formed and bought his rocket belt out from under him.
Oh, my God.
At this point, there's like lawsuits being filed. Stanley's trying to get the DA to press charges against Barker because Barker attacked him with a hammer. They're kind of hiding the stuff from Stanley.
Yeah.
Stanley and Barker and Wright are not. Barker and Wright are talking, but Stanley and them are not. They get Suitor back out to fly some more tests. Suitor says the RB-2000 had a mind of its own. It weighed over 140 pounds fueled and was not easy to carry. Ugh. The corset was uncomfortable. The controls were difficult to move with finesse. It was more like flying a truck with a steering problem. At this point, he does this. He sees what's going on with his company, and Suitor actually retires for good. He's like, I am done. I don't want to have anything to do with these
people
insane
are crazy
people.
Yeah. Oh, really? It's better this time, I swear. How do you have that hammer?
So at this point, Stanley's trying to sue to get the rocket belt and other assets back from this new company, Duratron. Oh, it's just a mess. And at some point, Barker...
The whole Optimus Prime, like, Autobots, let's roll out and save it from Durotron.
Totally. At some point, Barker and the Rocket Belt 2000 disappear. They just disappear off the face of the earth. At that point, so Larry Stanley's back talking to Joe Wright again.
Yeah.
They make a deal. Stanley will drop him out of this lawsuit that he's got to get his stuff back from Duratron. Because remember, Joe Wright was convinced to be part of Duratron.
Right.
It's like, I will let you off the hook on this thing. They don't know where Barker is.
Right.
He thinks that Wright knows where the rocket belt is, though. So Stanley says, I'll let you off the hook, and I will give you $10,000 if you will tell me where the rocket belt is. God. So Wright's like, okay, I'll do it. I will do it.
All right.
So they're hammering out an agreement. They're going to get everything signed with a lawyer and stuff, make a deal.
Yeah.
They're about to sign the agreement, and Wright just doesn't show up. So they're not sure what's going on. Stanley and his lawyers are calling. They're like, where are you? You're supposed to be signing this stuff. And Wright's like, no, it's okay. I'll come do it. I'll come do it. I just couldn't do it right now. And they're like, something's wrong when they talk to him. There's like, something is horribly, horribly wrong with this guy. He seems terrified.
Oh, no.
Within days, Joe Wright is brutally murdered in his home. Brutally.
Whoa.
And I'm gonna spare people the description of this.
Read the book.
Read the book. It's worth it. There is an entire other story about Joe Wright that is heartbreaking, and I don't think it's really appropriate for things.
That's fine.
But
yeah, read the book.
Read the book.
Wow.
A few weeks later, Brad Barker is arrested on suspicion of murder. They ultimately release him. They can't find anything that connects him to the Joe Wright murder. And he may or may not have done it. It's hard to say. Barker's then arrested again for taking Larry Stanley's Winchester rifle from the car audio place where he had stored it. He gets let go again. There's a civil suit that's about the Duratron thing. Barker just doesn't show up. Eventually, the judge, because Barker didn't show up, finds Barker and the whole Duratron thing guilty, and he awards Larry Stanley damages of $10 million.
Wow. Wow.
$10 million.
Wow. Wow. So it finally actually pays off, but we had to go through all of this to actually make it profitable.
But it doesn't.
Oh, no.
Because they can't find Barker.
Oh, no.
So, Barker didn't show up for the court, which is part of the reason that it was such a severe finding, was because Barker wasn't there to fight it.
Oh, my God.
Barker was working in Arkansas with a company called the Williams Tool Company to build something called the personal flying device. The personal flying device was a hovercraft shaped like a beer can.
I have seen pictures of this thing.
Yeah, it never worked. They never got it off the ground.
No.
But they wanted to use it to advertise beer at like sporting events.
Yeah. No, that makes total sense. You got Budman. I mean, come on.
He never got it off the ground. Eventually the guy that's his partner stops funding it. He seizes all of the assets, including the non-functioning hovercraft beer can. And Barker decides, well, that's my work. I want that beer can back. So what Barker does is he meets up with an old buddy of his, Tom Wade, and they dress all in black. God. They sneak to the Williams Tool Company place at night, dressed in black with walkie-talkies, and Barker sneaks in through an air vent from the outside into the warehouse where the giant beer can thing is kept. But but Tom Wade has gotten cold feet along the way and already called the sheriff.
What? Dude, what?
So Barker comes out of the air vent, lands flat on the ground. All of the lights in the room turn on. And he's surrounded by like 10 deputies pointing guns at his head.
Oh my God.
He is, obviously arrested. And that's not even the craziest part. We're about to get to the craziest part.
Oh my God.
Barker's released on $100,000 bail. He manages to get it together somehow.
Right.
He gets it from a bail bondsman.
Okay.
He gets a call from this guy who's a stuntman named Chris Wenzel. Chris Wenzel says, "Hey, I know you've done some stunt work." He's, he did some with Kinnie Gibson.
Yeah.
And you've done some aeronautics work. Could you come out to Hollywood and work with me to film the controlled crash of an airliner that we're doing?
Okay. This does not sound good.
No. So Barker calls his bail bondsman and says, I'm leaving Arkansas briefly to go do this job in California.
Okay.
He flies to Hollywood. He's met by Wenzel.
Uh-huh.
Wenzel takes him out for a meal. Wenzel takes him on a boat. Wenzel owns a boat. He takes him out on his boat for a little while.
Yeah.
Then they head back to North Hollywood where Wenzel has a house. Mm-hmm. He gets there. Wenzel introduces Barker to these four men and says, "These are the four guys you're going to be working with." Barker goes, "Great. Seems like they're nice guys."
Right.
They walk inside. They sit at a kitchen table. They chat for a little bit. Everything's really friendly. Mm-hmm. Then Wenzel pulled out a gun and pointed it straight at Barker's head. Within seconds, The convivial meeting between co-workers has been transformed into a terrifying, violent encounter. But why? I'm quoting from the Rocket Belt Keeper.
Oh, okay.
But why? Barker was sure he had not said or done anything to upset these men. So why was he being held down on the kitchen floor with a firearm pressed to his head? Wenzel stood over Barker, brandishing the gun. "Where's the rocket belt?" he demanded.
Wenzel, played by Tiny Ron.
Yeah.
Wait, what?
Wenzel takes Barker, he ties him up, he interrogates him for hours. He's like, "Where's the rocket belt? Oh my. What happened to Joe Wright?"
Whoa.
Yeah, so remember, Barker had been arrested for murder for Joe Wright.
Yeah.
He was let go.
Yeah.
And he just keeps asking him. He keeps asking him. He keeps asking him. Finally, he says, "Okay, you don't want to talk?" He puts him in a box, screws it shut with a drill.
Ironically, it was a beer shipping. But go ahead. Yeah.
Barker is trapped in this box for 7 days.
Oh, my God.
Right? Occasionally they would open it up, bring him out. "Where's the rocket belt? What happened with Joe Wright?" He wouldn't answer. They put him back in the box. Occasionally they'd give him like a cup of soup or a piece of pizza or something. And that's all he had.
Wow.
And Barker, when he was asked about this a little bit later, said, "I knew that no matter what happened, like no matter what I said, they were going to kill me."
Yeah.
Yeah. So I wasn't being brave by not saying anything. I knew it was the only way that I could stay alive.
Right.
So after about 7 days, he starts to discover that the handcuffs that they're using are starting to slip a little.
Uh-huh.
And he's like, "Okay, I got to wait for my chance." Mm-hmm. So he, at some point, he's pulled out. He's being interrogated again. He's kind of left on the floor, handcuffed to something. Mm-hmm. They leave the room. They leave him in there. He pops the handcuffs, flies out the window, and runs for freedom.
Wow.
It is so crazy. So he runs. Someone is like a good Samaritan, sees him running. Like the guy's been in a box.
Yeah.
He's a mess.
Yeah.
And they help him. They bring him to a phone at a diner.
Yeah.
Where he calls the FBI. The FBI shows up. The FBI is like, "Okay, are you Mr. Parker?" He's like, "Yes." And they're like, "We want you to show us the place." So they start driving back to where the place was, and they see Wenzel in the car behind him. And the FBI just swarm. and they arrest Wenzel.
I was about to say, they get to the house, and there's James Mason. "I have no idea what he's talking about, officer." Oh, my... Wow.
Wenzel ends up being sentenced to prison for 6 years. Larry Stanley, who they discovered along the way had hired Wenzel.
Aha. Okay.
Was sentenced to life plus 10 years.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. So the being that he's going to get reincarnated from
Yes.
is already screwed 10 years out of their life. Right?
Yeah. So he now they end up shortening Larry Stanley's sentence, because part of the reason they sentenced him so long was that he refused to admit that he'd done anything wrong. Even though along the way during the interrogation, Barker had seen him.
Oh, yeah.
He knew he was there.
Yeah. He's the one who bought the pizza.
Yeah.
Yeah. He might have chopped off my finger, but he deserved some sort of pizza.
So at this point, Stanley's in jail, Wenzel's in jail, but there's still the Duratron suit going on, which Larry Stanley's family is now handling. Barker thinks, "Hey, haven't I been through enough? Can this just be over?" But it is not over.
What?
So
Oh my gosh.
Barker attempts to have the previous settlement with the rocket belt overturned.
Yeah.
So he can just have legal possession of the rocket belt. Keep in mind, no one has seen the rocket belt in almost 10 years at this point. No one knows where the hell it is.
Coen Brothers, please make a movie of this.
Yeah, the judge won't overturn it.
Yeah.
So ostensibly, he still owes the family $10 million, I guess.
Oh, my gosh.
And the judge is like, you have to bring the rocket belt into court. We need to see it.
Okay.
Or I'm going to charge you with contempt.
Right.
On July 19th, 2004, Barker shows up to the contempt proceedings, doesn't bring the rocket belt.
Oh,
the judge is like, okay, look, one more chance. You were going to go to jail, man.
Yeah.
Bring the rocket belt. August 13th, Barker shows up with a big box filled with weird parts. No rocket belt. The judge reschedules it again. He is sent to jail indefinitely. I mean, it's just contempt. So there's no sentence.
So he's still there?
Nope.
Oh, okay.
After 6 months, they finally let Barker go.
Okay.
Still, no one has seen the rocket belt.
Oh, my God.
Joe Wright's murder, never solved. Larry Stanley was eventually released from prison. He doesn't know where the rocket belt is. And this is where the story ends. I know this has been a long trek, but the quote I want to end it with is one from Bill Suitor. And he says, Joe Wright was one of the kindest, most generous people I ever knew, said Suitor. I cannot think of one bad thing to say about him, nor can I think of one good thing to say about Brad Barker. As for Larry Stanley, what a loser.
Wow.
Barker and Stanley were obsessed and blinded by the notion that they were both going to learn how to fly and to become rich and famous. And that's all they cared about, being rich and famous. So much so that now Joe is dead, and none of them is rich or famous. If anything, they are infamous. As for me, it was the dumbest thing I ever got involved in. The dumbest. I do not normally grant interviews on the subject, and that will be all I will ever tell you about that sad chapter.
Wow.
That is the story of the rocket belt.
Wow. Wow. This just blows me away.
It's like crazy, right?
It's like arguing over who invented the, speedboat stunt show for theme parks.
Yes.
Like, I'm the guy. It's like, there's nothing to profit off of this, guys.
Right. And I mean, again, they never got it to work for more than 20, 25 seconds.
I know.
It was useless.
Oh, my God.
I mean, obviously, Kinnie Gibson was making some money doing these shows from time to time, but he wasn't getting rich.
No, it's, that's insanity.
Yeah.
So the next time you're watching a show at Disneyland, folks, just understand that there's some serious backstory of what you're watching.
Yeah.
Like, stuff happens behind the scenes.
He was locked in a box for 7 days.
See, I think I may have my plus up.
Oh, do you? I think we might be at that point.
Yeah, so I think this is the point of our show now that Kelly has regaled us with this amazing story here. So here's my plus up. People will arrive at Tomorrowland.
Yes.
And they will be put in a box for 7 days and ritually beaten until where's the Rocketeer sequel? Where's that going to happen? I don't know how. Okay, kidding aside.
Yes.
I don't know what my plus up with this would be, except to go back in time and tell them, guys, this isn't worth it.
It's not worth
This isn't exactly a plus up.
Seriously.
And I don't know if I really want to see, another guy in a jetpack over Disneyland, knowing all of this now.
Right, yeah.
Like, it makes me like it even less.
Cool, right?
Yeah, it's like, I don't know if I like this now. But I will say, for a genuine plus up, I would actually like to see them pay homage to the Rocketeer a little bit more at the park with some sort of attraction. They could easily reskin a roller coaster like the Tron coaster in Shanghai and turn it so that way you are bent forward, but you're all Rocketeers.
Yeah.
And it's a Rocketeer roller coaster.
Yeah.
That'd be cool. And that's about as far as I go with my plus up on this one. Because anything beyond this is just like just dumb.
Yeah.
You're like, this whole thing is just so crazy that I don't know how you could plus this up except going, just ignore it and let's do something with the Rocketeer.
Yeah.
You know?
Let's just don't, folks, don't get mixed up with a rocket belt. Just don't.
Yeah, just don't. It is a cul-de-sac.
Yeah.
It is the ultimate symbol of male fragility that men will kill and kidnap over 20 seconds of pleasure.
It's just, it really, I mean, doesn't it just sum up post-war America in so many ways? It's just like, there's so much, there's ambition, there's wonder, there's possibility, and it descends into just obsession and greed and this.
And a cameo with William H. Macy.
And just so much tragedy that it's stupid and funny.
It is.
Like, that's America.
I haven't laughed this hard during one of our shows in a long time. Like, my stomach actually hurts a little bit because it's just so, it's obscenely awful.
Yeah.
Like, when you really think about it, like, this is awful.
Oh, it's terrible.
This is terrifyingly bad, but I've known people like this, having grown up in Silicon Valley. You meet people who are this obsessed with this type of thing where they go, this is going to be the thing. Yeah. And everybody's looking at them going, no, it's not.
Right.
It really isn't.
Like,
no, it's going to be the thing. I'm guaranteed. I'm willing to kill over this. Is how much I go. You have problems.
Physics say it's not going to work.
Yeah. This is really not going to be a thing.
Yeah. And
really, Google Glass. It's going to be a thing.
Oy.
Where's the Google Glass?
Yeah, right.
Put you in a box for 7 days.
It's just, like, it's hard to even imagine this level of obsession, right?
Yeah.
Like there's
For
so
diminishing returns.
Yeah,
like, this is mental illness at this point.
Oh, it absolutely is.
Yeah.
Part of the story, what makes it so fascinating, none of, except for poor Joe Wright, and there is a whole lot more to that story, and please do go read the book.
Oh, yes, absolutely.
None of these people are nice people. like Bill Suitor's great. He seems like a good
Bill
guy.
Suitor seems, he's on the outskirts going, all I wanted to do was fly.
Yeah. But Barker and Stanley are just, you're just like, what are you guys doing to yourselves? You're idiots.
I know.
You're absolute morons.
It's insanity.
Yeah. And it's hard to speak to that sort of obsession. Like, why did you even care that much?
Let me explain something to you. I have a rocket pack, and I have a long fuel line over to your rocket pack. And I put my fuel line in your rocket pack. I steal your rocket pack. I steal it up.
That's exactly right.
It's that level of insanity. Yeah. It's there will be blood, but there will be rockets. Yeah. You know, like Daniel Day-Lewis will play Barker in the film of this, and it's just like,
and it's just like, you even think about Tomorrowland at that point, like, oh, we're going to show this futuristic rocket pack thing. Like around the time Isaac Asimov said we're about 10 years away from home rocket packs. Like, no, you're not.
Yeah,
like, this is never going to happen.
People will travel around in pneumatic people tube.
Yeah.
Wait a second. Hold on there. What? I never said people would be eating prunes in the future. What kind of thing are these people calling? What are they pulling here?
But here's what I'll say for my plus up here.
Okay.
Is if we are looking at a demonstration of transportation of the future, just reopen the damn People Mover.
And make it the Rocketeer People Mover.
Yes, that's fine.
That's fine.
Yeah, like through the world of the Rocketeer tunnel.
Yeah, it's just movie. It's just a giant IMAX screen surrounding the track. We're fine with this. We're totally okay with this. All of us tired old Gen Xers are totally okay with this, okay? We're fine. Well, we were fine with the bendy action figures.
Right.
Okay?
We thought they were cool.
They were awesome. They worked as great pencil erasers, okay? This is just exhausting.
The future is exhausting and the fake future doubly so.
That's our next T-shirt, by the way. The future is exhausting and the fake future doubly so. Yeah. That is our next shirt with a picture of the rocket guy flying right through the O of doubly so.
Yeah.
So.
All right. With that, again, I want to encourage people the Rocket Belt Caper,
yes,
by Paul Brown, really, really well worth it. And if you can find a copy, Pretty Bird,
yes, Pretty Bird,
which actually focuses a little bit more is on the Joe Wright story, which is a tragic and sad story.
Yeah. No, I'm glad that they immortalized him in a good way.
Yeah,
so that's good. Well, anyway, so I'm Peter Overstreet.
And I'm Kelly Rocket Belt McCubbin.
You've been listening to
The Lowdown
on the Plus Up.
We hope you've enjoyed this episode of The Lowdown on the Plus Up. If you have, please tell your friends where you found us. And if you haven't, we can pretend this never happened and need not speak of it again. For a lot more thoughts on theme parks and related stuff, check out my writing for Boardwalk Times at boardwalktimes.net. Feel free to reach out to Pete and I on our Lowdown on the Plus Up Facebook group or send us a message directly at comments@lowdown-plus-up.com. We really want to hear about how you'd plus these attractions up and read some of your ideas on the show. Our theme music is Goblin, Tinker, Soldier, Spy by Kevin MacLeod at incompetech.com. We'll have a new episode out real soon. Why? Because we like you.
Disneyland's second decade is appropriately inaugurated as a jet-propelled man blasts off from Tomorrowland. Ever since man has watched birds in flight, he has had a desire to fly like this.